Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I'm your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 18 of the 2023 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And this is the first installment of the Combine edition of the Ready for the Draft podcast. That's right. Obviously, NFL Combine is next in our pre-draft process. Senior Bowl was wrapped up, and now we're rolling straight into the Combine. February 28th through March the 6th. The on-field workouts, well, they're going to start on Thursday, March the 2nd, all the way through the weekend, culminating with Sunday, March the 5th. Running backs and offensive linemen. Wait, what? That's right. Running backs and offensive linemen, we're used to seeing them start the workouts and really start everything and really set the tone for the Combine. Well, this year, they're doing things a little bit differently. It's all about defense up front. So we're going to see the defensive linemen and linebackers on Thursday finish things out with the running backs and offensive linemen there on that Sunday. So it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a little bit different, not to what we're used to, but I'll tell you what, it's going to be a lot of fun to really see the defensive players be the guys that are setting the tone for the rest of the Combine and the rest of the workouts. So what I want to do with this segment of the Ready for the Draft podcast is really take a look at each of these positions as we lead up to the Combine. So over the next few days, we'll be breaking down each of these position groups, starting with defensive line. There are 50 guys in this defensive line group, a lot of guys to talk about. Really want to let you know what I'm going to be expecting, what I'm going to be looking for with a lot of these prospects as we get into the Combine. So obviously, D lineman number one, so DL1 is going to be Ade Adebare out of Northwestern. Now with Adebare, this is a guy who is known for his strength at the point of attack, right? This guy is very strong. You love the power in his hands, the bull rush, his ability to drive guys back, the power in his hands to stun offensive linemen coming off the football. This is a guy, look, 24.5 tackles for loss, 12.5 sacks to his credit as well, 6 pass breakups, 4 forced fumbles, has a nose for the football. Really the biggest thing when I think about him, though, is the power, the bull rush ability, his ability to set a strong edge against the run. He's all about power. I want to see Adebare, the athlete. That's really what I'm going to be looking for with him. Is he the type of athlete that you really want to see out of your defensive ends? Is he more likely going to be a early to mid day 3 pick? I think that's ultimately where we're going to see him, is probably in that 4th, 5th round range. What I really love about him, though, is that power. And that's one of the things that's going to speak volumes. We're going to see him probably rep out a ton of reps there at 225 in the bench press. But I think Adebare is a guy who could potentially move his way into day 2 consideration when it's all said and done, depending on how that workout goes. MJ Anderson out of Iowa State. Look, everyone talks about Will McDonald, the 4th, and rightfully so. This is a guy who's a fringe first-round player. MJ Anderson needs to really make a name for himself, really kind of step up at the Combine and really showcase why he's entering the draft, why he's made himself available. And the Minnesota transfer came in. Look, 9 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks in 2022. A guy who plays with a ton of effort, predictable pass rush moves. This is a guy who I thought played very well against the run, held up well against the run. Pass rush, he's still pretty raw when it comes to that. So you want to see the athleticism there as well. Can he bend? So you're going to be seeing the change of direction as well. I think some of the change of direction, we saw some of that against the run, but I'm really curious to see what type of ability does he have when he's turning the corner. Can he bend coming off of that? Is he a little bit of stiff in the hips? I think both he and Adebare starting things off. They're similar players in that respect. Felix Anadike Uzoma out of K-State. He's going to be DL3, 6'4", 255 pounds, right around there. This is a guy that I love because he has that speed coming off the edge, a really good burst, but then he also does a really good job setting a strong edge against the run, his ability to stack and shed defenders and bring running backs down around the line of scrimmage. But look, I think there are a lot of guys that are going to be in this next group of defensive ends. You've got Anadike Uzoma, you have Will McDonald, who we've just mentioned. But not only that, you also have Isaiah Foskey, who's a potential first-round pick. There's also Derek Hall from Auburn, who's actually going to be in the linebacker group, who we'll be talking about in next podcast. Keon White of Georgia Tech is another name. after you get outside the first 3 or 4 defensive ends, there are a lot of guys that are kind of stacking up there as guys who can be edge rushers. They can also defend against the run, and really who's going to separate themselves, because I think there are a lot of guys that are kind of bunched in there. I think there's a good chance that we can see Foskey and maybe even McDonald sneak their way into round number 1, possibly even Hall. I think Anadike Uzoma is probably going to end up being in that early second round range. Keon White's another one who could be a fringe first rounder or a second rounder depending on the team. So really looking forward to seeing the athleticism on display there from Felix, see if he can separate himself just a little bit from the rest of that group. Robert Beal out of Georgia. This is a guy who I think is still pretty raw. When you watch his game film, for me, there's a lot of missed opportunities out there on the field. I think he does a good job taking on blocks, stacking, shedding, being able to get to the running back. He'll crash down hard against the run. He's late to disengage at times. Want to see what some of that strength looks like, some of that power at the point of attack, but not much of a pass rush plan. So really what I think when you're looking at him, he'll get overpowered at times as well, both in the run, against the run, and then also getting after the quarterback. He can't play with his hand in the dirt. 2-point stance as well there at Georgia. I just think that his game is really raw at the moment, and so it's one of those things to where it's going to be getting him at the combine, really being able to watch him as an athlete. Are there traits that these teams can really pick up on and really utilize? And I think being able to see him out here against some of these other guys who are a little bit more refined with their technique, does he stack up from an athleticism standpoint? That's going to take you back to the game film and say, all right, maybe we need to look into Beal a little bit more. Right now I have him as a day 3 guy. I think he could fall really just about anywhere along that range. I think if he showcases some of those traits as a raw defender, 5th, 6th round is probably where I'd be taking him. But all it takes is one team to fall in love with him, and he could potentially come off the board in the 3rd or 4th round if they think he's a guy that they can mold into an effective 34 outside linebacker, which I think is ultimately where he'll be. Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin. Good Lord, this dude, he's 6'4", 317 pounds, played the nose at Wisconsin. This is a guy who I think could possibly even play in an even man front and hold his own. The athleticism, you see some of his ability to attack half a man and really look to try to penetrate and shoot gaps. We saw him at the Senior Bowl, some of the one-on-ones, being able to beat guys with his quickness. I think there were times where he did lose leverage and needs to watch some of that pad level at times. But this is a guy, the athleticism, I think he can get after the quarterback a little bit. I think he was kind of playing out of position. But again, time and time again, you saw him getting after that running back. I think he'll be great against the run. But look, he uses his hands very well. He's beating centers off the ball, using those hands, and then that short area burst to get to the quarterback. He's one of those guys, when we talk about first-round nose tackles, we're talking about guys that are running in that sub-5 range. I think Keanu Benton has the chance to be able to get into that sub-5 category. He won't be a first-rounder, but I think he'll be an early second-round pick, and I think teams will be happy to take Keanu Benton there on day 2, because you're going to get an athlete, a guy that can make a lot of plays right around the line of scrimmage and even behind it, making some tackles for loss. Then we get to Brian Bresee and Jalen Carter. When you're talking about, you got Benton, Bresee, Carter, that's really where I think a lot of the show is going to be early on in this defensive line class. But Brian Bresee, look, the athleticism is absolutely there. Look, 6'5", 300 pounds, high school basketball player. When he came in, you could see the instinctive nature to his game. He crashes gaps, able to control the gaps when he needs to, but then you also see the explosiveness, his ability to shoot and get into the backfield, rush the quarterback, uses his hands very well. The biggest concern is health. 2021, 4 games, and then he tears his ACL, out for the year. 2022 battled some health issues. Obviously, the family tragedy was the biggest thing that I think weighed on Brian during the season. And you look at him and the game film, you worry about him, less than 500 snaps under his belt, His pad level seemed to creep up a lot more. He was playing a lot more upright than getting that explosiveness off the ball, playing with leverage. A guy who has that versatility to play all the way up and down the line. And it's just one of those things to where, are we going to get back to that Bryan Bresee, is he 100%? Because there are teams that need a defensive tackle, and they could be taking this guy, number 11 from Clemson, early in round number 1, but he's got to be able to show that he is 100%, that he is getting back to that form that we know him to be. And that's really the thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing at the Combine is that athleticism back. 6'5", 300. If he's running in that 4'7", 4'8 range, then this is a guy that can potentially get taken in the top 10. Because you're looking at the Lions at 6, you're looking at the Eagles at 10. Those are two teams that need defensive linemen. Heck, you can even look at D'Amico Ryans sitting there at 12. If he's on the board at 12, there's a chance that Ryans could pull the trigger, although he may be a little bit gun-shy, because the 49ers did draft Javon Kinlaw at 6'5", 324 pounds with the 14th overall pick in the 2020 draft. And since then, Kinlaw, injured reserve in 2021 and 2022. Some of those injury concerns, that may rear its ugly head there, and D'Amico Ryans may pass sitting there at number 12. And look, it's one of those things to where Bresee could slide. We could see a draft day slide of his and fall maybe possibly to the Lions at 18, Seattle at 20. There are a lot of different things that could happen there with Bresee, and I think this workout is really going to go a long way towards seeing what he can actually do. Jalen Carter, we know that this guy is going to be a top 3, top 4 pick. It really just depends on what's going to happen at the top of the draft. But really the biggest thing, the explosiveness and the power, we're going to see all of that on display. And look, when you take to his teammate there at Georgia, Jordan Davis. We already knew that Jordan Davis was a stud, but then he shows up at the Combine, runs a 4.78 40 at 6'6" and 341 pounds, 1.63 10-yard split. That turned a lot of heads. And so really when you're talking about it, you get to other guys, defensive tackles. Haloti Ngata was another guy who shows up and a big man moving really quick. Obviously these are nose tackles, but still, at 6'4", 338 pounds, runs a 5'1", 340 with a 1.73 split. That 10-yard split is really going to be something there for Jalen Carter. I think really what you're expecting to see is this is a dude, look, you're almost expecting him to dominate the Combine, right? When you think of a guy like Dan Wilkinson, the last defensive tackle to go number 1 overall, 1994 out of Ohio State, being taken by Cincinnati, 6'4", 340 pounds. This was a guy who, in his workouts prior to the draft, bench pressed 225 34 times, then ran a 40 in 4.72, which is absolutely ridiculous for a guy his size, much like what we saw there with Jordan Davis. So I think Jalen Carter, the pressure's on a little bit to perform, but this guy's a tremendous athlete, and I think we're going to see just how good he is. When we move on from him, you're looking at Gerard Clark there out of Coastal Carolina, a guy who showed up to the Chanticleers as a 230-pound tight end and is now 6'4", 330 pounds. You see the short area burst. You see some of that quickness coming off the football. This is a guy who's very athletic, had 10 tackles for loss, and I believe it was like 3.5 sacks. So he has some of that ability to get after the quarterback. It's just a guy that nobody's really talking about. He wears number 15 there for Coastal Carolina. He's a guy that is a lot of fun to watch because of that quickness for a guy his size. Look, he's also very stout at the point of attack as well. I think Gerard Clark, especially when you're looking at that 10-yard split, I'm looking forward to seeing what this guy can do because, look, even though he put on 100 pounds, this guy still has the footwork, still has some of that foot speed, and I want to see some of that athleticism on display. I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch. Got another nose tackle that we're going to be seeing right after him, and that's Keandre Coburn out of Texas. 6'2", 344 pounds. The guy is very stout at the point of attack. You see some of the quickness, beating some centers off the football. Most of that is against the run. You'll see him a little bit get after the quarterback, being able to win with some quickness. We also saw some power as well. I think you're going to see him rep out 225 at a pretty good clip. And just really curious to see what type of athlete he is when you take him off the field and put him there in the combine setting. Brenton Cox, Florida. This guy is a tremendous athlete. Look, 6'4", 253, somewhere around there. He was a guy that I enjoyed watching. I saw the violence in his hands, his ability to really strike guys there, use that rip move, slap, and be able to make plays behind the line of scrimmage. You saw the effort. You saw him coming after quarterbacks, and he played really hard. He took on blocks, stack, shed, locate the football, drop guys behind the line of scrimmage. But the problem is he's got to win over the interviews. I think more than any other player, this is a guy, look, Billy Napier dismissed him from the team. This is a guy who started his career at Georgia, had to transfer to Florida, and then wound up getting dismissed from the team there. And Billy Napier said it was an accumulation of offenses, so that's something that's really a concern. Big red flag, because this is a guy who plays with a lot of ferocity on the field. So I think more than anything else, it's going to be the interviews for him to see whether or not he's really a draftable commodity or if teams are going to be taking him off the draft board altogether. Now, DJ Dale out of Alabama. I was talking about Keanu Benton possibly playing out of position. DJ Dale, I know, was playing out of position. 6'3", 300. He played nose guard there at Bama. But look, man, this is a quick penetrator. He's an even front defensive tackle. Shoots gaps in a hurry. High effort player. A guy that's going to beat you with quickness and getting up the field. I am looking forward to really seeing the athleticism on display. A guy at 6'3" and 300 pounds. You see some of that short area burst. Really want to see what that 10-yard split is going to look like. He's a lot of fun for me to watch, and just looking forward to seeing what he can do there. Followed by Gervon Dexter out of Florida, 6'6", 312 pounds. Number 9 was a guy that seemed to win both with power and with quickness coming off the football. Unfortunately for him, you didn't see the production. This is a guy, look, he had 55 tackles on the year, but just 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, really just 5 sacks and 10.5 tackles for loss in his career. So, what is going on here with Gervon Dexter? Because you see some of the athleticism, you see his ability to beat guys at the point of attack, gets his hands inside, able to drive guys back, showing his ability to get skinny, shoot gaps, run down ball carriers, but he wasn't always finishing. That was really the biggest frustration. And so when I look at him, I see the size, I see the length, and you think of a guy like Calais Campbell, right? Well, Calais Campbell at 6'8", 307 pounds. This is a dude, 39 tackles for loss, 19.5 sacks there at Miami in his 3-year career. Shows up at the combine at 6'7", 290 pounds with 35 3/4 inch reach. Runs a 5 flat 40 in a 1.72 10-yard split, and still ended up being the 50th overall selection taken by Arizona, round number 2. Think about that. And so, when I look at Gervon Dexter, could he be a second rounder? It's one of those things to where I think the more I think about it, this is a guy that's probably going to end up being, a 3rd or 4th round guy. Initially, I was thinking the athleticism, the traits with him, but man, the production on the field is really a concern. I think he's going to have a really big day there at the combine to really get people going back to the game film and trying to figure out exactly what's going on there. Now, the next 3 guys, it's kind of funny. You look at them, and their body type are very similar. You have Yaya Diaby, Ekene Enechukwu, and Viliami Fehoko. So with Yaya, they're all 6'4", 270, right around there. Now Diaby out of Louisville, this is a dude who plays with a lot of speed, a guy who you're going to see a ton of effort from. You're going to see him getting up the field. It does a really good job, using some of that his handwork, some of that power to his game as well. You love the athleticism. He's just a guy that people aren't really talking about, but a guy that I think could come out here, have a good workout, and really start turning some heads. He's a guy that can put his hand in the dirt. He can be a stand-up rusher. I think there's some versatility from a scheme standpoint. I think he can be an end in a 4-3 defense, or also play outside linebacker in an on-man front. Then you get to Ekene Enechukwu out of Rice. Again, 6'4", 270-ish pounds, right around there. This is a guy who's very raw, and that's really the difference that you're going to see here with him. He doesn't always keep his feet driving. Inconsistent pad level, but you do see some signs there that this guy does have has a plan, You'll see that bull rush, that speed to power, getting into the chest of the offensive lineman. You're going to see him attack the outside, dipping that inside shoulder. Decent push-pull as well. He's one of those guys that I think is going to have some tools. I think he is a draftable commodity. I think he's a guy that when you ultimately look at him there at the combine, you're going to see an athlete, 7 sacks this last season there for Rice. People aren't really talking about him because, look, he's there coming from the Owls. Nobody really gets to see this guy play. I think he's a guy that could potentially work his way into the rotation, but he's going to need some work because he's still pretty raw. But again, he does have the traits there that you're going to be looking for. And then with Fehoko, San Jose State, 6'4", 263, a guy who has really good power in his hands coming off the edge. Another guy can be a stand-up rusher, put his hand in the dirt as well. Offers really a nice array of pass rush moves. You're going to see the push-pull. You're going to see some good bend. The ankle flexion, I noted that against Eastern Michigan in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. Saw some of that ankle flexion bending around to get to the quarterback. Seemed to be a twitchy athlete. Good bull rush, power in his hands at USC against USC. In 2021, you saw him stout at the point of attack against the run. Really did a good job using an arm over to beat the right tackle. Flattens out in a hurry to get to the quarterback for a sack. Really what I'm looking for with him is, on tape, he looks to be a twitchy athlete. Show up at the combine, let's see that twitchiness. Let's see his ability to change directions. Let's see the agility, the lateral quickness. Let's see him be that complete athlete. If you don't see that, if you see the stiffness, that's going to send you back to the game film and say, what did I miss? What am I missing here? And that's really the same thing that I'm going to be looking for with Fehoko, but a guy who I think could definitely help his draft stock, because this is a dude who knows how to get after the quarterback. That's one of the things that's really a lot of fun with him. Something that to really keep an eye on. 18.5 tackles for loss this last season. Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. 9 sacks as well. Very effective as an edge rusher. Isaiah Foskey there out of Notre Dame, 6'5", 260. This is a dude who loves that long arm coming off the edge. I think that's really his favorite move. You want to see him use a little bit more in terms of those pass rush moves and that versatility. But look, he's a tremendous athlete. He's a guy that's going to get off the edge. He's going to flatten out in a hurry, get to the quarterback. You just want to see that athleticism on display. You want to see his ability to change directions. Can he bend? What's that 40 time, what's that 10-yard split going to look like? Just how quick is this guy going to be coming off a football? Then there's Ollie Gay out of LSU, 6'6", 250, a guy who really is going to be all about the bull rush. You're not going to see a whole lot of quickness coming off the football. He's not going to beat you with speed. And so really the biggest thing is what type of an athlete do you have? He's got the long wingspan. At times he gets caught inside on run plays, not really setting a strong edge. And so that's really the big concern that I have with Ollie Gay is I think he started his career off so hot there at LSU, and then I know that he was injured there in 2021. 2022, you just didn't see the explosiveness, and that's really the thing that you're looking for in a lot of your edge rushers. Is this going to be someone that you're probably not going to be taking until the 6th, 7th round when it's all said and done? Want to see that athleticism though, and if he can't really provide that, then I think there's going to be some limitations to his game. Plenty of athleticism there with Nick Hampton, 6'3", 225 out of Appalachian State. They actually have him with the defensive linemen and not with the linebackers. Kind of surprising there. This is a guy that you're going to want to see drop into coverage a little bit. I think he's undersized and is a guy that's ultimately going to be a 3-4 outside linebacker. A lot of speed. He's a quick twitch athlete. He's all about speed. Does a really good job spying quarterbacks as well. That's something that you definitely saw with him. You saw some good pass rush moves, decent push-pull, but this is a guy that's going to show that speed. He's going to chase you down and drop you for a loss. If you're a running back and a guy that can turn the corner in a hurry, flatten out, get to that quarterback. Once he turns on that afterburner, that acceleration, you're going to see that here at the combine. You're going to see that explosiveness. That's something that I'm really looking forward to. Want to see if the power and the strength to his game, because really he looks mostly like a guy that is going to beat you with that speed, and if he does get blocked, he struggles to disengage because of that lack of overall size. So want to see if he's added some muscle to that frame as well. Because look, he's 6'3", 225. That's kind of what they said that he came in at. Think about Von Miller. He was 6'2" and 5'8", 246 pounds. Then runs that 4.5 340, which was absolutely ridiculous. And he was already regarded as one of the best outside linebackers in the country, and that's ultimately why he was the second overall pick. And I'm not saying that Nick Hampton is going to be that guy by any means, but it's just one of those things to where, with where does Nick Hampton fall? What is he ultimately going to be? What is he going to bring to the table? Can he add some muscle to that frame and still be athletic? Or is he going to be one of these undersized guys that's going to be really, it's going to limit some of his effectiveness and really be kind of one of those situational pass rushers only. Zach Harrison out of Ohio State, look, 6'6", 272, really good length. And that's one of the things that he's known for is that length. More of a power guy versus JT Tuimoloau on the opposite side, who was a twitchier athlete. But this is a guy who I think is very refined with his ability to get after the quarterback. You love his ability to use those long limbs, and you saw a little bit of bend to him. This is going to be a way for teams to really see what he can do as an athlete. I was impressed with the way that he was able to take on Broderick Jones in the Peach Bowl. Look, quick burst off the ball, speed to power, gets under that pad level, stood him up, put him on some skates, drove him all the way back to Stetson Bennett. Look, Bennett still was able to get rid of the football, but it was still very impressive, his ability to be able to do that. Uses some quickness coming off the football there as well. Strength ultimately allowing to bend around the corner. The biggest thing for me is I want to see some of that explosiveness. I want to see that any twitchiness to his game, or is it all going to be about the power and using those long levers? I think if he can show some of that athleticism, not just a linear player, but a guy that can also work, with change of direction, being able to bend as he's running the arc. If he can do that, then I think that's really going to help Harrison's draft stock, because he's one of those guys that could be in that second to third round range. He's not getting past day 2 by any means, but he's one of those guys that I think really came on this year, especially having Tuimoloau opposite him, and he's somebody that I'm really looking forward to seeing at the Combine. KJ Henry, 6'4", 255, they're out of Clemson. Everybody talks about all the other defensive ends and defensive linemen at Clemson and kind of forget about KJ Henry. This is a dude who's going to beat you with speed. That's really the biggest thing. I thought he was most effective as a stand-up edge rusher, more so than putting his hand in the dirt. I think when he put his hand in the dirt, there were times where he struggled to get off blocks. You allow him to play in space and use that speed rushing the quarterback. That's something that really showed a guy that can dip and bend a little bit coming off the edge. He's one of those guys. I think he was overshadowed, and so you really hope that he can take that next step here at the Combine with the ability to showcase his athleticism and really make teams say, you know what, we need to go back and watch more of number 5 there in that Clemson orange and see really what this kid can do and make sure that we've got everything correctly with him. He's a guy that I think 3rd, 4th round range. Could he be one of those hybrid linebackers in a 4-3 scheme? Could he be a defensive end? Could he potentially even drop and be an outside linebacker in a 34? Those are some of the things that I'm going to be looking for out of him. Now, Dylan Horton, 6'4", 275, a guy who, he really burst onto the scene because of the athleticism. They're saying that this is a guy who's going to have a 38-inch vertical leap, running a 4.55 40. If teams see that guy at the Combine, along with what we saw at the end of the season, against K-State, TCU in a losing effort had a couple of sacks in that game, but then against Michigan, 4 sacks. This is a guy who was beating Zach Zinter off the football to the inside. He was chasing J.J. McCarthy down from the backside, running through gaps, getting to the quarterback in a hurry. Horton seemed to be all over the place, and so that was one of the lasting memories of big number 98 there for the Horned Frogs. And so you see this athleticism, those traits really come out in the combine, he's one of those guys who could be one of those risers and saying, you know what, we've got a lot to work with this kid, especially what he did there when the lights were brightest against an offensive line that proved to be one of the best in the country. Let's go. Let's see some of that athleticism, right? So after Horton, you're going to get to Siaki Ika. So you get from the athleticism to Apu Ika, this huge mammoth defensive lineman, 6'4", 350 pounds. And when we say the athleticism, this is a guy who is surprisingly nimble for a guy his size. He's massive. He's difficult to move off his spot when he's lined up against a single block. He'll eat up blockers. What's really weird, though, is that when he gets double teamed, he gets moved off of his spot very easily, which is surprising. Yet, he still draws a lot of that attention, takes on multiple blockers as a result, but he doesn't always hold the point of attack like you were expecting to see. You see him making reads against the run, that short area burst. This is a guy that can get after the quarterback a little bit. So really the big curiosity is just how quick is he going to be? I mentioned some of the nose tackles, because a lot of people are saying, well, maybe Apu Ika could be a first rounder because he's showcased his ability to get after the quarterback. But look, when you're talking about guys that are being drafted in round number 1, look, Dontari Poe, one guy, at 6'3" and 346, ran a 4.9 840. I already mentioned Haloti Nata and his size, still running right around that 5 flat area. I mentioned Jordan Davis, another guy that was drafted there in round number 1, and then Vita Vea. Here's a guy that some people have really compared him to, because look, Vita Vea, 6'4", 347 pounds, 15 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, and at 6'4" and 347 pounds, ran a 5.10 40 with a 1.76 10-yard split. So if Apu Ika really wants to be in that talk about a first-round guy, he's going to have to be running in that range. I just don't know if we're going to be seeing that out of him. We see the short area burst. We see some of that quickness. That 10-yard split is something that we can be looking at, but I just don't know that he has the overall athleticism that any of those guys have. And then really his inability to anchor there against those double teams is a cause for concern with him. And that's one of the things that I'm worried about his draft stock. I think he's going to have to prove that he is athletic, that he can prove that he is strong at the point of attack. What's he going to put up in the bench press? Can he showcase some of that power in those drills as well? So he's one of those guys that I think has a lot that he could gain from this, but potentially a lot to lose as well. Transitioning to Thomas Incoom from Central Michigan. And look, this is a guy that really burst onto the scene this year. 8.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks in 2021 as a junior for the Chippewas, but really made his presence felt in opposing backfields in a major way. 19 tackles for loss, 11.5 sacks to go along with 57 tackles. So very active at that defensive end position. Look, this is a guy, he does a really good job using his hands to attack the hands of the offensive lineman. A guy, look, against Eastern Michigan, I watched him chase the running back, Samson Evans, 42 yards down the field. Really impressive seeing that effort and that speed to be able to chase down that running back. But again, I mentioned the rip, the hand usage. You'll see some rip moves as well. Really good with those hands. Physical at the point of attack as well. A guy that can really jolt guys and have them off balance. Play against the run a little bit. Is going to look to take that inside rush as well. And this is a guy, look, I think, if you're a team that's looking for an edge rusher, I think could he be a third-round pick? Possibly. He'll probably end up being in that fourth-round range, but a guy that I think can definitely get after the quarterback. And look, at 6'4", 265, let's see just how athletic he can be. Let's see how he can bend coming off the edge. You want to see that ankle flexion? You want to see his ability to dip that shoulder, get low, coming off that edge, or are we going to see any stiffness in those hips to make you pause a little bit and say, all right, is this a guy that we know he can get after the quarterback? Was it because he was playing against inferior competition, or is this a guy that really we can see translating to the next level? Kalijah Cansey. Now look, Kalijah Cansey coming out of Pittsburgh is a guy that is a lot of fun to watch. And you watch the game film, I was watching the all-22s of this guy, and look, at 6 foot 275, you see the explosiveness. It's absolutely real. 34 and a half tackles for loss, 16 sacks. They're at that defensive tackle position. You see the power in his hands to strike and drive guys back. But this is also going to be a defensive tackle that's just going to beat you with that quick penetration. Uses his hands really well, slap, quick move, and beating guys, shooting gaps, getting into the backfield in a hurry. Could chase down quarterbacks. You see the effort as well. And I think any Pitt defensive tackle, any guy who's showing up right around that 6 foot range is going to get compared to Aaron Donald. Now look, it's unfair to compare any defensive tackle to arguably the best defensive player in the history of the NFL with what Aaron Donald has been able to accomplish. But if we just look at where Aaron Donald was when he entered that 2014 NFL draft, at the combine at 6 foot 3/4, 285 pounds, 4.68 40 with a 1.63 10-yard split. Just think about that. Think about the absurdity of that, and then obviously the power to his game as well. We always see him with the shirt off, just all jacked, right? 35 reps at 225, and that's something that I think is absolutely staggering. And look, the flip side, Jalen Twyman coming out of Pitt. If this is a guy, look, coming out his last year, 41 tackles, 10.5 sacks. We were expecting him to really take off, right? Measured in at 6'1 3/4, 301 pounds, runs a 5.39 40 with a 1.74 split, and ultimately got himself drafted in round number 6. So it's one of those things with Kalijah Kancey. I don't think he's showing up at weighing 301 pounds. He played right around that 275 range. I think he's going to probably measure in right around 6 foot. If he's 6 foot 280 and he's running in that 4.6 range, this is a guy who could end up being a first-round pick and a guy that could end up being a top 20 pick when it's all said and done. I had Aaron Donald coming off the board in the top 10 picks in my mock draft back in 2014, and he slips all the way to the Rams. Very surprising that happened, but they're sitting there at number 13, not expecting Aaron Donald to even fall to them. And look, this guy just absolutely set the world on fire. And I'm not saying that Kalijah Kancey is going to be that guy to be the next Aaron Donald by any means. But when you're just thinking about teams this is a copycat league. They're going to look for the next Aaron Donald or what they think is going to be the next Aaron Donald. And if you can see a guy like Kalijah Kancey that has that quickness to get off the football in a hurry, shoot gaps, and get into the backfield, that's something that's going to be staggering. That's something that they're really going to take notice of. But look, Kalijah Kancey left before he could really make a stamp of approval on that imprint. Because when you look at Aaron Donald, 66 tackles for loss, 29.5 sacks in his career. You had that impressive year, back-to-back seasons, 34.5 tackles for loss and 16 sacks isn't bad. But look, Aaron Donald made that leap his senior season, and that really made all the difference in the world and really set the world on fire, as I mentioned earlier. But when you look at teams, again, like the Lions at 18, the Eagles, they have multiple picks in round number 1. Could he come off the board there at number 30? It's entirely possible. Seattle sitting there at number 20. That they could also look for a defensive tackle as well. Could Kancey move up the board even higher? It's possible, but not likely. But he's going to be one of those guys to really keep an eye on. Again, not the next Aaron Donald by any means, but one of those guys that I think there are going to be those comparisons. Teams are going to try to look for the next Aaron Donald. And if he puts together a really quick, if he's running in the 4.6s at 6 foot 285, teams are immediately going to look at him and go, shoot, this guy could be the next Aaron Donald. I mean, can he put up 225 35 times as well? Because we know Aaron Donald has that power at the point of attack as well. I think Kalijah Kancey is going to be one of those fun studies there at the combine. Tyler Lacey out of Oklahoma State. Let's go ahead and move on. Tyler Lacey, number 89 there for the Cowboys, 6'4", 295 pounds. A guy that shows some pretty good effort coming off the football. Came into the 2022 season at 22 years of age. a guy that's battled some injuries in his career. Just want to see some of that athleticism. I think he played defensive end there. He'll probably end up having to be a D tackle. I don't think that he's necessarily explosive enough. He could potentially be a 5 technique. I think that may be his world there at the next level. He's one of those guys that's going to be a day 3 selection, but obviously he's going to be looking to continue to improve his draft stock. So he's one of those guys that I think has a lot that he can potentially gain from his performance at the combine. How about Isaiah Land? Well, this is a dude who is very explosive coming off the edge. Led the FCS in sacks in 2021, 19.5. Buck Buchanan Award winner. Comes back to school there at Florida A&M, and 12 tackles for loss, 8 sacks in 9 games. Had to deal with an MCL sprain. But look, this is a guy who you're going to see the speed coming off the outside. Played with his hand in the ground as a stand-up rusher as well. I think he's going to end up being a 34 outside linebacker. You saw him play with more power than I think teams were expecting, especially there at the Senior Bowl. So he's one of those guys that's going to be interesting, probably in that 5th, 6th round range. But look, people, you have to remember James Houston. He was a 7th round pick there of the Lions, and we saw what he was able to do as a pass rusher. Isaiah Lamb, because of what James Houston has done, you may see him get drafted a round or 2 earlier this time around. So interesting to see what happens there. Will McDonald out of Iowa State, again, he's 6'4", 245, a guy who's very athletic, coming off the edge. You see the speed rush ability, very intelligent, reads the quarterback's eyes, knows that he's not going to get to the quarterback, gets his hand in the passing lanes. Iowa State's career sack leader, a guy that just continues to bend, come off the edge. He stays low, rips through, turns the corner in a hurry. A guy that is going to continue to get after the quarterback. You love the effort. Watched him against Oklahoma against Anton Harrison, a guy that a lot of people think may be a 1st round pick. Did a really good job. Speed rush up the field, worked his way back to the inside, got to the quarterback as well. A guy that you're just going to continue to see that effort. Excellent speed rush. You see the counter moves. You want to see just how twitchy this guy is. Are we going to see that flexibility, his ability to bend coming off the edge? Really want to see the type of athlete that he is. Is he in that same range with Isaiah Foskey? Could he be end of round 1, possibly a round 2 guy? It depends on the scheme, honestly, because look, at 6'2", 245, he's kind of undersized a little bit, but he's definitely someone who I think you're going to see him time and time again make plays all over the field, especially behind the line of scrimmage. I just think he's a lot of fun to watch, and I'll be excited to see what he can do there at the combine. Isaiah McGuire is an interesting guy there out of Missouri, 6'4", 274, another speed rusher. Love what he does with his hands. Another guy that's going to be a stand-up edge rusher or put his hand in the dirt. Lacks some instincts against the run, too often loses leverage, finds himself blocked, inability to deconstruct blocks quickly. But you're going to see some ability as an edge rusher, a guy that's going to be able to bend and come off the edge a little bit, be a situational pass rusher, I think at least early in his career. Really want to be able to see that there at the combine more than anything else. As we continue to move down the list, you get to Mike Morris out of Michigan. And look, Mike Morris, he's 6'6", he's 292 pounds, but he was really kind of playing that stand-up edge rush position, kind of a linebacker almost there for the Wolverines, and a guy that really kind of took the world by storm early on. A guy that was really producing at a high clip as a pass rusher, getting into the backfield. You saw some of that twitchiness. Had a couple of sacks against Iowa, a sack against Michigan State, Rutgers, but down the stretch, really wasn't much of a factor against Nebraska, Ohio State, or TCU. Really wanted to see a little bit more out of him. There was that, just a stretch of 6 games where we really got to see him get into the backfield. But I worry about him a little bit. He's one of those guys that I think struggled to deconstruct blocks unable to get off the blocks quickly. Didn't seem to really have a pass rush plan at times. Pad level got way too high as well. He's one of those guys that I think, is that athleticism. He did do a good job when, outside, cross the face of Paris Johnson to get skinny and get through the gap and get into the backfield. So that athleticism working in space is there. It's just weird because he's 6'6", 292, and he almost does better as a stand-up rusher versus putting his hand in the dirt. So I think he's really raw. A lot of people were expecting him to come off the board a lot earlier. I see a day 3 guy. I think because of the traits, because of his length, he may end up coming off the board a lot earlier in round number 3. But to me, he feels like a 4th or 5th round pick. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what he can do to kind of elevate his draft stock there at the combine. Caleb Murphy out of Ferris State. Now, Caleb Murphy is really an interesting dude. He started his career at Grand Valley State. Had just 1 sack, 13 tackles in 8 games as a redshirt freshman. Then he transfers to Ferris State. And this dude just went off. 2021, 14.5 sacks, 21.5 tackles for loss, 5 forced fumbles. They Bulldogs wound up winning the Division II championship. Then as a senior, he sets the NCAA single-season record with 25.5 sacks. Ties himself, that 39 tackles for loss as well. They repeat as national champions. He also became the first non-FBS player to win the Ted Hendricks Award as the best defensive end. Also won the Gene Upshaw Award as the best lineman in D2. Cliff Harris Award as the nation's best small college defensive player. The biggest thing that you look at with him is the athleticism is absolutely there, but he's going up against inferior competition. He hasn't really played much against that jump up in that level of competition. He's 6'4", 245 pounds. You wonder what you're getting with him. His arms, when they measured him at the Shrine Bowl, they're less than 33 inches, so that's obviously a concern. I think stand-up edge rusher, you allow him to really play in space. That's something that you wanted to see there with him. He's got good speed coming off the edge. He's a guy that, I think he was winning because of his athleticism. He was beating guys that he was just a better athlete than. I think he's going to be extremely raw. But you did see hand usage. You did see the ability to bull rush as well. The biggest concern that you're going to see with him is, again, what's he going to be able to do against top-notch competition? I think he's a guy that's going to struggle against the run, because he's not the biggest guy. I think he needs to continue to develop as a pass rusher, continue to develop as a defender of the run. And so I think that's something, he needs to really, the instincts aren't necessarily there, especially against the run. So I think he's going to be a situational pass rusher, probably in the 6th, 7th round range. But I think, being able to showcase his athleticism is really what teams are going to be looking for with him. And that's something that I think could potentially be on display there at the Combine. Now, Myles Murphy, on the other hand, this is a dude who I think you're going to see him beat you with speed. He's going to beat you with power. This is a guy that I think everybody is excited to watch because you're going to see just some absolute crazy explosiveness coming off the edge. 6'5", 275, 36 tackles for loss, 18.5 sacks in his career, 5 pass breakups, 6 forced fumbles as well. A guy that is going to be, you want to talk about twitchy. This dude's going to get twitchy. That's something that I think is absolutely going to be fun to watch there at the Combine. Look, he's an instinctive player. I've got a note here in 2021, reading, Ikem Ekwonu, his release on a screen, chases down the running back all the way to the sideline to drop him for a loss. Ekwonu, with an overset, took an inside path to the quarterback. Something that was impressive. Put a forearm into the side of Ekwonu, use those legs to drive to the quarterback as well. but then also being able to bend around the edge and coming after the quarterback. Against BC, had an end around to Zay Flowers going into the boundary, and as the right defensive end was going to the left into the boundary, as the right defensive end, he gets up the field, chases down Zay Flowers for a 2-yard loss. Really, I'm curious to see what that 40 time is going to be, just how athletic he's going to be. What's that vertical leap? That's going to tell you a lot about that lower body explosiveness. I think he's a real twitched up player, a guy that can also play with power. Is he going to be the top defensive end taken in the draft? I think he and Tyree Wilson are going to kind of have it out. And so it's one of those things where if you're dividing the line and 25 guys, then Myles Murphy is likely going to be in that second half. He'll be towards the top. Tyree Wilson will be towards the bottom of the group. And so because of that, we'll at least be able to see those guys at that same time really showing off their athleticism. And so I'm really excited to see what Myles Murphy can do. Can he be ultimately that first defensive end taken? That's really going to be the big question mark. There were times where he disappeared during games. So obviously that's going to be a concern. But a guy, again, that athleticism is absolutely there, absolutely real. PJ Mustipher, nose tackle, 6'4", 323, had a season-ending knee injury in 2021. Look, this guy's not going to be your quick penetrator. I think he's going to, gap control, a guy that's going to take up a lot of space there at that nose tackle, high school wrestler, so really low at that point of attack. But he's not very twitchy. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be shooting gaps, getting up the field in a hurry. So I think in terms of athleticism, I think he's going to be limited. But I think we're going to see some strength. I think we're going to see some power. And those are some of the things that you're really going to be looking at. You're going to look at that body type. Does he have that thick lower body, that mass there to be able to anchor and then take on those multiple blockers, absorb all those multiple sets of hands coming in there and trying to drive him off the football. Moro Ojomo, they're out of Texas. 6'3", 280 pounds. This guy, he's an interesting study. When you look at him, not a guy that's going to necessarily, in terms of production, not a ton of that, but you're going to see a guy who's going to be physical at the point of attack. He has a lot of power. You see that in his hands, his ability to strike and drive guys back. The biggest frustrating thing is, too often he's going to stop his feet. I think that's where he gets himself into trouble. Pad level at times is going to get him in trouble as well. Saw him get stood up by Wanye Morris and then got thrown to the ground. But I love the versatility. He's able to play up and down the line. When he drops his weight and able to anchor at the point of attack, he can be very effective. I don't know how effective he's going to be winning with speed. I think there are a lot of people that expect him to be much more twitchy in this. I love the effort that I see out of him. I'm just curious to see what he can do. I think he does a good job with some of that short area burst. I just don't know how twitchy of an athlete this guy's going to be. I think there is some stiffness to his game. Honestly, there are some people who think he's going to get drafted in the second round. I see more of a third round guy, but he's one of those guys, I'll be honest, I haven't seen a ton of tape on him. So I'm kind of looking forward to the combine, seeing what type of athlete he is, and then potentially taking that and going back to the film and watching more if I need to. Really interested in seeing what Ojomo can do. Zach Pickens, 6'4", 305, big dude, a guy who I actually thought moved a lot better in 2021 than in 2022. I thought pad level seemed to get way too high more often than not, was getting driven back, was losing leverage in the run game. A guy who, zero technique to three technique. You'd see him doing a lot of the, that move up and down the line. He has that quickness to get early penetration, get into the backfield. You're going to see him shoot his hands in, able to attack the outer half, push up the field to get penetration. You see some power at the point of attack. He gets those hands in there and really drives off the football with that lower pad level. He can be very effective. The problem is a lot of times, if he didn't win early, he didn't have much of a counter move after that. I thought at times he was slow off the snap, initial rush is stifled, no secondary move, and ultimately he stood up and really didn't make much of an impact. I thought he was much more explosive in 2021, so I'm really curious to see the type of player that we see at the combine. And that's really going to be a big question mark for me. If he can showcase some of that athleticism, then we can go back to the film, especially the 2021 film, and study it a little bit more. But this is a guy that, I thought had chances of being a day 2 pick, and for me, I don't know if that's really where we're going to see him come off the board. He could very well be a 4th or 5th rounder. When I look at that 2022 tape, I wish we can get him back to being that explosive self that we saw last season. Then we get to one of the more intriguing prospects, Jose Ramirez out of Eastern Michigan, a guy that he was dueling with Tuli Tuipulotu from USC as to who the top sack artist was going to be. The MAC Defensive Player of the Year. Look, this is a guy who's going to win with speed. He's a speed guy. He's very thin in his lower body. That's something that I'll be curious to see. Can he put on any of that weight on the lower half? So I think that's something that you saw him a lot of times get knocked off of his pass rush path, and that's where he'd struggle at times getting redirected, being able to then get off of that, get towards the quarterback. But a guy that, look, I look at my notes, speed rush, rip move. You're going to see him dip that inside shoulder. You're going to see an arm over. You're going to see the chops, really attacking the offensive lineman's hands. And look, when you talk about him and the sacks in his career, he posted 20 and a half sacks. And when you talk about that at Eastern Michigan, Pat O'Connor, 20 sacks, Max Crosby, 19. So he actually had more sacks there, left as the career leader in sacks, which I think is something that should not be lost when we talk about Jose Ramirez. Yes, he's going to be a speed guy. I don't know really where he's going to fall, but let's just talk about Max Crosby for a quick second. 6'5", 255, and he shows up at the combine, and arm length isn't huge. You're talking about 32 and 7/8 inch arms. Runs a 4.66 40 with a 1.62 split, and vertical leap of 36 inches. So you're seeing a guy who definitely has that explosiveness coming off the edge, right? And now what has he done? 37 and a half sacks in his career, a 2-time Pro Bowler, second-team All-Pro in 2021. I'm not saying that Jose Ramirez is going to be the next Max Crosby at all. When you look at Jose Ramirez and what he was able to do in his time there at EMU, 19 and a half tackles for loss and 12 sacks in 2022, you have to at least get somewhat excited. Look, I know that when you're talking about the two, it's kind of hard to compare them because Max Crosby at 6'5", and 6'4", 6'5" range. Jose Ramirez a couple inches shorter at 6'2", so he doesn't have quite the length that Max Crosby's going to have. Max Crosby drafted in the 4th round, 106 overall. Let's see what type of an athlete. Let's see what the measurements come in with Jose Ramirez as an edge rusher. 5th, 6th round range, may not be out of the question for this guy. And look, if he can put up numbers like Max Crosby in college, what can he do at the next level if given the right opportunity? Jalen Redmond out of OU, 6'3", 292. I was kind of surprised that he decided that he was going to go ahead and enter the draft, but definitely a guy who is a solid athlete, a guy that I think can get into the backfield. 14 sacks in his career, 31 and a half tackles for loss. Look, double-digit tackles for loss in 2019 and in 2020. So a guy that I think just needs the consistency more than anything else. You see the explosiveness, you see his ability to make plays, and I would have loved to have seen him come back to OU for one more year, really kind of solidify himself as one of the top defensive line prospects. But he's a guy that people aren't talking about, and a guy that I think can surprise people, and this could be a way for him to kind of showcase some of those skills. Tavius Robinson out of Ole Miss. Tavius Robinson, look, this is a guy, he's one of the bigger defensive ends at 6'7", 245 pounds. In his 3 years there at Ole Miss, 13 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks, including 6 this past season to go along with 4 forced fumbles. You love the length. I think that pad level is a concern at times, being able to stay low. You're going to watch him in the drill. Can he stay low, or is he popping up all the time? Really going to be curious to see what he can do there. You get to Jacqueline Roy. They're out of LSU. A guy who, look, at 6'4", 315 pounds, played that nose tackle position. This was a guy who was too easily moved off the ball as a 3-4 nose tackle. I think he's better served in an even man front. He was quick to shoot gaps, but if he didn't win early with the burst into the gap, he would get too tall at times, get stood up too easily. He'd also start driving his man back and would stop his feet. So really the biggest thing that you want to see with Jacqueline Roy is obviously the power, the strength, and that's something that we didn't really see. Want to see him in the drills. Is this a guy who can drive his feet? If he's coming in there and he's attacking, and is he stopping those feet, or is he continuing to move those and keep the pad level low and drive and explode into those pads and drive the guys back? He's one of those guys to me that is somewhat limited. I love his effort, but even the hand usage is inconsistent. He's the guy that needs to have a really big day to send people back to the film and look for those traits with him, because he was kind of frustrating at times to watch on game film. Nesta Jade Silvera there out of ASU, kind of an undersized guy, 6'2", 306, right around there. I'll be curious to see exactly what he measures in at. Undersized guy, but the burst, that's one of the things that I absolutely see. Burst coming off the football, his ability to kind of spin back to the inside against the run and play in space a little bit. A guy that he started his career there at Miami, moved to ASU. When you look at the overall numbers, not very much of a pass rush guy. Just 3.5 sacks, 20.5 tackles for loss in his career. He's the guy that I want to continue to watch play, because he was more of a rotational guy there at Miami. Went to ASU to see what he could do, kind of elevate his game a little bit, and show flashes. That's one of the things with him. He was a little bit of a frustrating player, because you'd see those flashes, but you wouldn't always see him take command of things. There at ASU, look, 56 tackles, very active there from that defensive tackle position. So he's one of those guys that, if he performs and really showcases some athleticism, he's going to send guys back to the film. Really want to study things a little bit more. Then you got Mazi Smith, 6'3", 337 pounds, another nose tackle. This is a guy who I think can be effective against the run. He can get shoot gaps, get into the backfield, uses those hands to drive guys into the backfield in a hurry. You're going to see him with some good short area bursts as well. He's one of those guys. I thought that he did a great job against Iowa, reading a tunnel screen to Arlen Bruce, peels back, chases him down after just a short game. You saw some good athleticism, good change of direction. Want to see that showcase there at the Combine as well. Showcase some of that athleticism out of Mazi Smith. I think the gun charge that he had, he's going to have to explain some of that there in those interviews. But definitely a guy that I think, he was a guy that kind of held things together up front a lot of the time there for Michigan. Not much in terms of the numbers from a production standpoint, but he had those 48 tackles as a nose tackle. It is pretty impressive. Just 2.5 tackles for loss and half a sack to his credit. But you saw the athleticism, some of those traits. So that's something that you're definitely going to be looking at. But look, they mentioned on one of the early broadcasts that I think it was the Colorado State game, that he repped out 335 20 times. What are we going to see at the Combine when he's repping out 225? That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Now, Nolan Smith from Georgia, I don't know if we're going to see him there at the Combine, but this guy, look, he's a twitched-up dude. He's 6'3", 245. Closing speed for days. You're going to see the athleticism there. A guy that could definitely play in space. A guy that can do a pretty good job setting the edge as well against the run. You see the blitzes, the ability to get downhill and get after the quarterback. You just wish that he hadn't injured his shoulder in the first half of that Florida game. But look, 2022 season before that, 15 hurries, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He was destined to have a huge year for the Georgia Bulldogs. Look, that defense was still explosive without him. But number 4, is he going to be a first rounder? I don't think so. I think there are some questions to his game because, he 20 tackles for loss, 12.5 sacks. He didn't produce enough for people to say that he's an absolute first rounder. I think he could find his way into round 1. It's just hard to evaluate him because of some of the injuries. But the hurries, that's something that I keep going back to. I look at that and I'm like, man, he had three sacks in his last 4 games there. The 15 quarterback hurries, a guy that just kept finding himself in the backfield. He's exploding off the ball. He's getting into the backfield, making plays against both the run and the pass. Could he be a first rounder? The more I think about it, there is a chance for Nolan Smith to be a first round pick. But he's one of those guys that I think he'll really impress guys in the interviews. This is a guy, look, he was the biggest cheerleader for that team the rest of the season, and one of the leaders, one of the captains of the team. And so I'll be curious to see really where he lands if he gets to do any of his workouts, whether it's at the combine or at his pro day. But look, even if he won't get far, I think the Rams sitting there, I think at 36, they need edge rushers. And Nolan Smith would be a guy that I think the Rams would love to get. I think there are a lot of teams that are sitting right around there that could use edge rushers in 34 schemes. And I think Nolan Smith, if he does fall to round 2, he won't be on the board very long. Dante Stills out of West Virginia, look, 6'4", 274 pounds, kind of an undersized defensive tackle. I think this is a guy that we can ultimately see move into maybe a 5 technique at the next level. A guy that, look, you talk about his dad, Gary, 26 sacks in his career there at West Virginia, a guy that played in the league for a lot of years with the Colts. Darius Stills is his older brother, 11.5 sacks. And then you've got Dante. And Dante, look, in terms of the size, his brother was kind of undersized there. Dante Stills is going to offer, again, 6'4", 270, 280. Going to have more of that length. 53 tackles for loss, 24.5 sacks. That's something that I think, can't be, you can't miss that. This is a guy, he's explosive. You'll see him dip his inside shoulder, some good bend. When he went up against Wanya Morris when they played Oklahoma, being able to turn the corner, work his way back to the quarterback, really a good get off as well. The explosiveness, quick penetrator. I think he's a guy that teams need to kind of look out for. You're going to be looking for somebody who can make plays as in, behind the line of scrimmage, both against the pass and the run. Dante Stills, look, his brother didn't get drafted despite the fact that this, he's an explosive guy and a quick penetrator. Dante Stills is going to get himself drafted. It may not be very high. It'll probably be mid to late round day 3. But I like Dante Stills. I love the Stills brothers, watching them at West Virginia because they were so quick getting into the backfield. I think the timing there, you see the athleticism. I thought, look, they played against Maryland, and you saw him use his hands, get physical against Jalen Duncan, the guy that, a lot of people are talking about as a potential first-round pick. Look, I'm curious to see where Darius Stills lands, but I want to see some of that athleticism come off there at the combine. Tuli Tuipulotu there at USC, 6'4", 290 pounds. Look, the junior, he had nothing left to prove there at USC. The Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, an All-American for the Trojans. And look, 49 was the heart and soul of that defense. This was a guy who just seemed to be living in opposing backfields. 22 tackles for loss, 13.5 sacks. A guy that just always seemed to be, he lined up all over the line. He was even a stand-up linebacker, not only on the edge, but then he'd also walk up, shooting A-gaps. And you'd see him drop into coverage a little bit. So there were times where you wanted to see him just coming after the quarterback nonstop. He was asked to do a lot of different things because, frankly, Alex Grinch's defense was limited in terms of the talent. But look, you love the explosion coming off the edge. You love his hands. I think that's really where his game is at its best. his rip move to the inside. I watched him against Joe Alt, a guy that a lot of people think is going to be one of the top offensive tackles in next year's draft. He and Olufashanu, for sure. He was beating him, using his quickness, using those hands as well to turn the corner. You're going to see him as that edge rusher, speed to power, driving guys back into the backfield, speed rush, pull that right tackle's arm down as he's coming around. Speed coming right through there, flattens out, gets to the quarterback in a hurry. He's got speed, he's got power. He's a guy that could be, really line up anywhere that you want him to be. He could be a 34 defensive end as a 5 technique. You could play him at a 3 technique in an even man front. Very athletic, a guy that can play all over the line. Really the biggest question that I'm going to have is how much twitchiness are we going to be seeing there at the combine? What type of display are we going to see from him? Because I talked earlier about guys like Cameron Jordan. When you look at Cameron Jordan, 6'4", 287 pounds, and again, I'm not saying he's going to be the next Cam Jordan by any means, because look, Cam Jordan was a tremendous athlete coming off the edge there for the Cal Golden Bears at 6'4", 287, ran a 4.78 40 with a 1.64 split, and had 35-inch arms. I mean, this dude had just incredible wingspan, these huge 11-inch hands as well. I don't think Thule's going to have the arm length or the hands that we saw from him, but I think that 40-yard dash, could he run around that 4.78? It's going to be close. That vertical jump as well. One of the things that you look at in terms of the overall production, 34 tackles for loss, 16.5 sacks in his career. Cam Jordan is playing defensive end at the next level. You see what he's been able to do there with the Saints. And, Thule, he's a toolsy guy. I think, he struggles against the run. I think that's ultimately what's going to get him there. And I think that's what keeps him from being a potential first-round pick. But, I mean, if I'm the Chargers, I'm sitting there at number 21 overall, I still want to consider Thule because of his ability to get after the quarterback, his ability to play that 5 technique. They need to get a guy in there that's going to help support Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack. I think he's the guy that can absolutely do that. May even be available there at round number 2, but I think if he can showcase some of that athleticism in that tweener position as a defensive end or defensive tackle, I think that'll go a long way towards his overall draft stock. Right after Thule, you got some studs. So Thule, man, you better make sure that you put on a show, because guaranteed Lucas Van Ness of Iowa, Keon White of Georgia Tech, and then Tyree Wilson will all put on a show. Lucas Van Ness, I mean, shoot, they call him Hercules, Thor, whatever you want to call him, coming out of Iowa. This dude wasn't even the team's starter. Joe Evans and John Wagner were the starters there, and Lucas Van Ness still is putting together some crazy numbers. 6'5", 264, 10.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, at 13 sacks in his career as a redshirt sophomore. So a guy who could have come back and put together even better tape and been one of the top pass rushers from next year's draft. But as it is, the tools are absolutely ridiculous. You see the speed to power, the leverage that he plays with, the bull rush. He just drove Paris Johnson back into the backfield. This is the guy that we're talking about as a top 16 pick in the draft. Physical, the good speed. He's still very raw, lacks some technique, but the athleticism is ridiculous. The strength is ridiculous. He's going to put on a show, that's for sure. You get to Keon White out of Georgia Tech, 6'5", 286 pounds possibly. And the Old Dominion transfer, look, in 2019 had 19 tackles for loss, 27 quarterback hurries, 13 quarterback hits, and 635 plays. Transferred to Georgia Tech, and he's still putting on a show. As a stand-up edge rusher, did a really good job reading the quarterback, getting himself into position. There were times where he got overpowered at the point of attack, but you also saw him, look, against Ole Miss, he got driven back by Broker, who had leverage on him, but then he uses his left hand to kind of shove Broker to the side, uses a quick swim move, wraps up Zach Evans for no gain. I think one of the biggest things that everyone talked about was his ability to turn and run on a wheel route. Running back runs a wheel route, and he shows the athleticism to be able to do that. I think that was something that was definitely impressive. Really kind of head turning there for that athleticism. A lot of that speed to power coming off the edge, using that length to long arm guys. He'll slide into that 3 technique on third down, use that speed to power coming off the football, 2 hands to the chest, ultimately gets into the backfield, collapses the pocket, gets after the quarterback. You love the speed as well, that athleticism. Is he a first-round pick? I don't know. I don't know if he's truly a first-round pick. One of the things that I loved, though, was what he did against Broderick Jones. Again, another guy that we're talking about as a potential top 20 pick. The burst off the football, the hands to the chest, the physicality, rip move to get the edge. Was ultimately put in a headlock, but they didn't end up calling it. And that athleticism, man, he and the power. Let's see what he can do at the combine, because he's following Lucas Van Ness, 2 guys that I think can end up helping themselves potentially solidify their status as first-round picks. Then you have Tyree Wilson, who's ultimately trying to showcase his ability as a potential top 5 pick if Seattle is sitting there on the board, and both Jalen Carter and Will Anderson are off the board. I look at Tyree Wilson. Look, 6'6", 275. He's a twitchy athlete, violent hands. The quick get-off, though, he can bend, rip coming off the edge, stand-up defensive end, put his hand in the dirt as well. Look, tight end tried to chip him, runs right through it. The speed to the quarterback affecting the throw, uses those long arms, the long limbs. That absolutely is on display. You see the speed, you see the power, you see his ability to play both the run and the pass. You see the instincts as well. He's got a plan as a pass rusher. You see some of the secondary moves as well. He's not the most twitchy of the guys in this group. You're not going to see him bend nearly as much as, say, a guy like Myles Murphy, but the length and the power, I think, are superior to Murphy's. So that's really what's going to be interesting, when we see these 2 guys coming off the board. I think he'll fit in very well in Seattle. I think that's ultimately where I think Tyree Wilson's going to end up going. He did battle a foot injury, which ultimately made him declare for the draft. Didn't play the rest of the season. Ended up sitting out that Oklahoma game, I think was the first game that he missed. But, man, you put on the film at Texas Tech, and number 19 just jumps out at you. Really a lot of fun to watch. Colby Wooden there at Auburn, 6'5", 284. Not overly bendy, but can rush the passer coming off the edge a little bit. Can stack and shed, shoot inside versus the run. Pad level's inconsistent. Struggles a lot with that. Seems to lose leverage way too easily. Want to see what type of athlete he is. He's one of those guys to where at 6'5", 284, maybe he can kick inside. I think he could also potentially be that 5 tech. Really want to see what he can be at the next level. What can we really see out of him? And I think the combine is going to help us kind of be able to picture some of that. Let us go back to the tape again and study him a little bit more if we need to. Then you get into the Byron Youngs. Byron Young of Alabama, 6'3", 292. I think because of some of the other players on that defensive front, he wasn't really getting a lot of the credit. But I saw a guy who was very athletic, and there's a 3-game stretch where he had three sacks and a forced fumble. He did get 2 upright at times. Needs to watch that at pad level as well. But I thought he did a great job working outside to maintain outside leverage. Works across the line versus the run. There was a play where he read the running back, cutting back to the inside. Good change of a direction to get back to the inside and drop the running back. Keeps working to get to the quarterback. You see the effort as well. And at 6'3", 292, I think he could be a 5 technique. And I think the athleticism and then the intelligence. I think he's well coached. You see the gap integrity. You see his ability to set the edge against the run, making good reads out there as well. He's one of those guys to me that is going to surprise some people, I think. And I'm curious to see just how athletic he's going to be stacking up against some of these other potential 5 techniques. You get Colby Wooden and Byron Young back-to-back. That's going to be something that I'm going to be really curious to see play out. Then you have the other Byron Young out of Tennessee at 6'3", 235 pounds. Really can't confuse the two Byron Youngs. But the guy out of Tennessee is a guy that, I think he's a little undersized. So, is he going to be a 34 outside linebacker? Can he play with his hand in the dirt as a 4-3 defensive end? That's going to be a question that I think we're going to want to try to get answered at some point during the combine and throughout the whole process. And some teams may have already formed an opinion on that. I haven't quite gotten there just yet, but we know that this guy has the explosiveness. Back-to-back seasons with 10-plus tackles for loss, 23.5 in his career, 12.5 sacks, a guy who can be pretty bendy coming off the edge. You see him run twists and using that speed, straight line speed to get through gaps. I think he can use that speed coming off the edge. And look, he's not just a one-trick pony. He's not just going to play the pass. He can also get it, be effective against the run as well. So I think that's going to definitely help his draft stock. I think he's a day 2 pick. The only question mark is exactly where you're going to play him. And if a team already has figured that thing out, then I think it's going to be probably that second, third round is where you're going to see Young. Much better than the days when he was a Dollar General assistant manager from 2017 to 2019. Really a cool story and a guy that I think is just I think he's continuing to get better and better as well. Finally, Cameron Young out of Mississippi State, 6'3", 315 pounds. Look, he was the nose tackle, 34 defense there for the Bulldogs, lined up over the center. Not an incredible athlete. A guy who I thought did a great job holding his ground against double teams. He'd try to overpower guys, take them straight on. I thought he used his hands well in hand fighting, but he didn't always advance his position. So he's one of those guys that I think he needs to showcase some of that athleticism and showcase some of the power as well. He's just somebody that he'd slide out, laterally, getting outside, but that slow movement also made it difficult for him to change directions and get back into the other direction. So really, I think there's some limitations to him physically, and so that's really going to be the big question mark is can he showcase some athleticism at the combine? So I know we ran a little bit longer than we wanted to, but we kept it under 90 minutes. So hopefully you've enjoyed the content to this point. Those are the guys that I've watched. I've watched a lot of game film, watched it during the season, watched the All-22s as well. And those are some of the takeaways that I have, especially getting into the combine. I want to see what these guys look like. I want to see the athleticism. I want to see some of the power. We know that we've got some of the freaks in here. We've got some raw athletes. And then you're going to see some of the technicians. And I think that's going to be evident in a lot of the different drills. And I'm just excited. You've got guys that are going to get drafted in all 3 days of the draft. Guys that are going to make an impact for their teams, not just on special teams, not just as starters, but guys that can be in that rotation and make plays for their team. And this is just the start of it here at the combine. And you'll get to compare a lot of the guys to each other. And I know they talk about it being the underwear Olympics, but this is really the one setting where you can get all of these guys in one place, be able to see them and kind of compare them against each other and really see how they move, how they flow, the type of athletes that they are, and really be able to use that and compare that to the game film. Is it the same guy that I'm seeing? I think about Kareem Hunt, a few years ago when he entered the combine, looked much more explosive as a smaller back. He lost some weight, became much more explosive, and you take that away. And that's something that I think you absolutely are looking for with these guys is they've had some time to prepare for the combine. What type of athlete are we going to see? Are they putting in that time, or are we going to see some of those disappointing times and really start scratching your head wondering what's going on? I'll never forget Anquan Bolden. I actually had him as a first-round pick And then he goes out to the combine, runs at that 4.7, 4.8, and ultimately was a third-round pick. I mean, we know the type of career that Anquan Boldin had, but the performance there at the combine really had a lot of people shook. And then you also want to make sure that you guard against those workout warriors. I think Mike Mamula, after he had such a phenomenal combine performance, the Eagles really fell in love with him, was a top 10 pick as a result. And we know the type of career that Mike Mamula really had, kind of an NFL draft bust. And so the workout warriors are guys that you want to stay away from. So if you get wowed by somebody's performance, that should take you back to the game film. And did you see the same athlete? Did you see that performance there out on the field? If so, then really all the combine is doing is just validating what you've already seen. If you're seeing a different player, then really that's going to be the next question is why? Why am I seeing a different player here at the combine than I did during the season? Was this a guy that, hey, he looks good without the pads on, but once you actually get him out there on the field, he just doesn't finish. He doesn't, he's not that playmaker. There are a lot of different question marks there. So you don't want to necessarily just fall in love with that, a guy that's going to just be that workout warrior. There are some guys here that are going to put on a show athletically, but I think those are also guys that you can go back to the film and see some of that. I think some of the limitations for some of those guys are going to be more on technique than anything else. So you really have to make sure that you've got that game film studied, you know who you're looking at, and be able to kind of take things from there. So we'll go ahead and put a bow on this podcast. Next podcast, we're going to be talking about the linebackers. Who's going to be the top guy? Is it going to be Drew Sanders? Is it going to be Trenton Simpson? Are we going to be talking about Jack Campbell? With that linebacking group, not only is it going to be that group of guys, but we're also going to see some of the edge rushers as well, guys that I didn't mention already. So we've got the Will Andersons to Andre Carter. Nick Herbig is another guy as an edge rusher. BJ Ojulari, O'Shawn Mathis, Lonnie Phelps also will be there. Traditional linebackers, mentioned a few of the others, but then you also have Noah Sewell. You're going to have Dayon Henley, a guy that I'm really excited to see. How about Servassier Dennis? I mentioned Derek Hall earlier. Yasir Abdullah is a guy that I think is underrated. Same with Dorian Williams there out of Tulane. D. Winters from TCU, I think, has a chance. Henry To'o could end up being a second-round pick when it's all said and done as well. Ivan Pace has a chance to be the most explosive linebacker in the draft that could help improve his draft stock with a huge 40 time and a huge performance at the combine. So there are some definite athletes to be on the lookout for with this draft. Linebacker draft class. So until next time, everyone, for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Get ready for that combine. Until next time,